Hey guys, Mr. Brown. Hope you guys are doing okay. Today we are going to work on lyric poetry on page 92. All right? Let's start with the Learn About section. The lyric. The lyric is one of the oldest forms of poetry. The name comes from an ancient musical instrument, the lyre. In its original meaning, the lyric was a poem that could be set to music or sung. In its modern meaning, the lyric is a poem expressing direct, intense personal feeling. Many lyric poems celebrate nature or love. So any of those things can be taken as the definition of lyric, as I covered in the notes. It is an intensely emotional event, not really a story, but just this little snapshot of something that happened. It can also be a poem that is easily set to music. I'll include a clip of one of these poems that's been put to music. It can also be, well, one definition of it is that it's one of the oldest types of poetry in the world. It's right up there with epics. A lyric poem often does not tell a story. It presents an experience, a single effect or feeling. There are many different types of lyric poems. An elegy is a lyric poem that expresses a feeling of sorrow, especially for a person who has died. Another kind of lyric is an ode. An ode is a poem of praise. You're praising something or someone. Pastorals are lyric poems that celebrate the beauty and pleasure of country life. Ballads tell stories of romance and adventure. We've already dealt with elegies and ballads when we did Barbara Allen. Barbara Allen was, of course, a love poem, but it was also a poem about death, the death of Barbara Allen and Sir John. So oftentimes these things can overlap. I cover that in the notes section. As you read these selections, ask yourself, could these words be set to music? Very easily, as we're going to see. Is the poet presenting an intense personal feeling, creating an effect, or telling a story? All right, the first of the three poems on page 93 is The Passionate Shepherd to His Love by Christopher Marlowe. Kit Marlowe, as he was sometimes called, was a fairly controversial figure. There's evidence to suggest that he was bisexual, openly bisexual, in a time period where that was not done. There's a line attributed to him that would seem to indicate that he liked his male companions on the younger side. The two things that make me happiest in the world are a good bed and a boy in it. All right. He was scandalous. First off, like we've discussed a little bit, or maybe we didn't discuss this. I think we might have skipped over this. In Shakespeare's time period, in this period of time, the English Renaissance, the Elizabethan age, actors and people associated with theater, it's not like today. There were not people chasing after them with cameras, trying to get their autograph. There was no paparazzi. You didn't want to get a selfie with one of these people. They were considered by the government unemployed men. And routinely they would be rounded up and thrown out of town. So a lot of times the acting for some of them was a side gig. You do something else, and acting was something you did on the side. Marlowe was more scandalous than most. First off, there's, like we said, his sexuality, which would have been controversial in his time period. Then there's the fact that he apparently was a spy. During this time period, England's at war with the Netherlands. Marlowe was working for both sides. He was a double agent, providing both sides with information and playing each side off against the other one. He was also apparently a counterfeiter. This might have been him doing this on his own, or this might have been him under instructions from the Dutch government to, put out fake money and devalue the English currency. In any event, all these things aside, Marlowe was an incredible poet-playwright. He wrote for just 6 years, from 23 to 29. In that time, he wrote 4 very famous plays, the most famous of which is called Faustus. It's a story about an old man who sells his soul to the devil for youth so that he can go after this girl that he's infatuated with. If you've ever seen the old Brandon Fraser movie Bedazzled, that's Faustus. He also wrote several lyric poems. He was a contemporary of Shakespeare. They were both in London at the same time, both writing for the playhouses, both competing. And Marlowe was considered the better of the two while they were both alive. To put it in movie terms, Marlowe would have the big summer blockbuster, and Shakespeare stuff would be going straight to streaming. His career was cut short at the age of 29 when he was killed in a bar fight. Yes, he was killed in a bar fight. There are different theories about what happened. The most accepted story is that he got into an argument with the proprietor of the place over his bill. The place was apparently also a brothel, a very expensive, high-class, upscale whorehouse. We don't know what he was arguing with the proprietor over, but in any event, he felt like he was overcharged. He pulls a knife on the guy. They fight. The barkeep gets the knife away from him and nails Marlowe in the eye with his own knife, killing him instantly. Now, there are some people who believe that one side or the other, the English or the French, found out that he was playing both sides against the middle, spying for both sides, and eliminated him. But that's more of a conspiracy theory, X-File kind of a thing. We don't know for sure. In any event, at the age of 29, Marlowe gets stabbed through the eye with his own knife, killed instantly, and this clears the way for Shakespeare to become William Shakespeare. If Marlowe hadn't gotten himself killed, maybe his name would be the name that's known the world over. And, Shakespeare would be the guy who gets the footnote mention in your book. In any event, The Passionate Shepherd to His Love on page 93. Come live with me and be my love, and we will all the pleasures prove that hills and valleys, dales and fields, and all the craggy mountains yields. And we will sit upon the rocks, seeing the shepherds feed their flocks by shallow rivers, to whose falls melodious birds sing madrigals. This speaker is a shepherd. He tends sheep. And he's trying to encourage his lover to, as the poem says, come live with me and be my love. And he promises, we're going to assume it's a her, this beautiful, idyllic mountain valley for them to live in. He describes the hills and valleys, dales and fields, the craggy mountains. And he says, we'll sit upon the rocks and we'll see the shepherds tending to their sheep. We'll watch the rivers flow. We'll listen to the birds singing. Very much this is a pastoral because he's describing how beautiful the place they're going to live is. Right? Beginning on the third stanza. He starts promising her gifts, trying to entice her to come to him and be his love. And I will make thee beds of roses and 1,000 fragrant posies, a cap of flowers and a kirtle embroidered all with leaves of myrtle, a gown made of the finest wool, which from our pretty lambs we pull, fair-lined slippers for the cold with buckles of the purest gold, a belt of straw and ivy buds with coral clasp and amber studs. And if these pleasures may thee move, come live with me and be my love. All right, those next two stanzas, he's promising her all these things. Mostly it sounds like he's promising her clothes. A cap, a skirt, a kirtle, a gown, slippers, all right, things like this. And most of it is stuff that it sounds like he could go out and harvest this himself from nature. A bed of roses and fragrant posies. And he tells her basically, if all this stuff I'm promising you sounds good, come live with me and be my love. All right? The next page. Thy silver dishes for thy meat, as precious as the gods do eat, shall on an ivory table be prepared each day for thee and me. The shepherd swains shall dance and swing for thy delight each May morning. If these delights thy mind may move, then live with me and be my love. More gifts. He's going to provide her for silver dishes for them to eat off of. And an ivory table, elephant horn, ivory is made from elephant tusk. And he's going to get her one of these tables for them to eat off of. And he says, every morning the shepherd swains, the young shepherds, will sing and dance for us to entertain us. And he says, if all this sounds good to you, if it delights your mind, come live with me and be my love. All right? Now, a couple of different things potentially going on in this poem. All right? First off, you can take it at face value. This is a love poem. This young shepherd is trying to entice his lover to come live with him and be his love. And he'll give her all this stuff if she will but come with him. All right? Now, this is where it gets a little more complicated. This young gentleman is a shepherd. He tends sheep for a living. Now, does this strike you as a potentially very high income occupation? All right? Probably not. But look at some of the things he's promising to get for her. In the fourth stanza, he talks about buckles of the purest gold for her slippers, gold buckles for her shoes. All right. The next stanza, he talks about coral clasp and amber studs. These are semi-precious stones. This might have been possible, but again, he's a shepherd. He hasn't got a whole lot of money to spend on jewelry. All right. But the next stanza is where the deal really gets sealed. Silver dishes. All right. That would be very expensive. And then an ivory table. Ivory, elephant tusk. This has to come all the way from Africa or India. Ridiculously, stupid expensive. This is the sort of thing that royalty would have had. And again, this guy's a shepherd. All right? So we really have to question how realistic are his promises. And this leads us to look at the poem in one of two different ways. One, this is a naive young man, very much in love, making promises, dreaming, hoping that one day he will be able to provide his lover with all these things that he's promised. And in the meantime, we'll have this beautiful, wonderful place to live in, and our love will support us. We can live off love. All right? That's the idyllic way to look at it. The other way to look at it is much more cynical and much more in my keeping with my interpretation of Kit Marlowe. This guy's spitting game. He is lying through his teeth. All right? He is promising this chick, the sun, the moon, the stars, just come live with me and be my love. Maybe just for one night. Just for a little while. You know, maybe. All right? He's the guy who walks into the club with a fat roll of bills and a rubber band. But if you peel off the 20 or the 100 on the outside of the rubber band, all that's underneath is ones. All right? He's making promises he cannot keep, intending to entice this young woman, young person, just for the purposes of hooking up with her. All right? So you can look at the poem in these two ways. One, it's your stereotypical love poem, a naive young man making promises to the person that he loves, hoping to entice her to come with him and be his love, and one day I will give you all this stuff, and until then we can live off our love. Or dude's trying to get... Dude's trying to hook up. All right? And making promises he has no intention of keeping. All right? Now, on 95, we have the next poem, The Nymphs Reply to the Shepherd by Sir Walter Raleigh. And just as the title implies, this is the girl's response, and from nymph, we know it's a girl, to the shepherd. Nymphs were minor goddesses from Greek mythology. They basically kept nature beautiful. They made this flower smell good, sprinkled dew on all the grass in the morning, made the colors spring brightly open, things like that. Supposedly they were so beautiful if you saw one it would drive you mad. So to be called a nymph is a great compliment. But in any event, this is her response to the shepherd's offer. Now, it hits on all the same notes. If you were to put the two poems to music, they would hit on all the same beats. They have the same rhythm and rhyme scheme. But their themes are very different. All right? Two different men from very different backgrounds. You've got Kit Marlowe, who's living kind of rough and tumble as a poet playwright, living paycheck to paycheck in some kind of sketchy circumstances. Then you've got Sir Walter Raleigh. All right? Mariner, privateer, explorer, soldier of fortune. This guy was Captain Britain, all right? And this was also a man who had a few coins to rub together. He knew the value of money. He came from nothing and came into something. Or he came from less and became more. And this is his response to the whole idea of being able to live off love. Or maybe even seeing through, if we look at the more cynical version of Passionate Shepherd, maybe the girl seeing through his BS. All right? It begins. If all the world and love were young, and truth in every shepherd's tongue, these pretty pleasures might me move to live with thee and be thy love. If the world was this perfect place you've described to me, where we could be young forever and live off love, and I could be sure there was truth in every shepherd's tongue, if I could be certain you were being honest with me, then these pretty pleasures, all these things you've described to me, might get me to go with you and be your love. And there's a giant, huge, understood but between the first and second stanzas. But time drives the flocks from field to fold, when rivers rage and rocks grow old, and Philomel becometh dumb, the rest complains of cares to come. She's talking about the passage of time, and she's basically saying time is going to pass, and it's going to destroy everything. Time is going to drive the flocks from the field to the fold. This basically means it's going to drive the sheep that you've been describing to me from these beautiful fields to the slaughterhouse. All right? It's going to make the rivers rage, and it's going to make the rocks grow old. And the Philomel, the nightingale, the bird song that you were describing earlier, that bird's eventually going to lose its voice. It's going to die. All right? And then we have more cares to come. All right? Real world concerns. The flowers do fade and wanton fields to wayward winter reckoning yields. A honey tongue, a heart of gall, a fancy spring with sorrows fall. Again, the passage of time is going to destroy everything. It's going to make the flowers fade away. It's going to make the fields dry up and die with winter coming. What sounds like honey dripping off your tongue now will later be as bitter as gall. In fancy spring, its sorrows fall. Thy gowns, thy shoes, thy beds of roses, thy cap, thy kirtle, thy posies, soon break, soon wither, soon forgotten, in folly ripe, in reason rotten. All this stuff you've promised me, it's not going to last. It's going to fade away, it's going to rot, it's going to decay, and then we will have nothing. All right? Right this minute, in this beautiful place, and the way you're being so nice to me and talking so sweet, it sounds wonderful, but when you sit and reason it out, it's rotten. All right? This is not going to work. Thy belt of straw and ivy buds, thy coral clasp and amber studs, all these in me no means can move to come to thee and be thy love. Nothing you've promised me is going to get me to go with you and be your love. All right? She's turning him down hard. All right? Now, the last stanza, just like the last poem, you can interpret one of two ways. But could youth last and love still breed, have joys no date nor age no need, then these delights my mind might move to live with thee and be thy love. All right? If the world was this perfect place you've described to me, where we could be young forever, where we could somehow live off love and not need material things to live off of, then yes, maybe I would go with you and be your love. All right? The indication is that she does actually have feelings for him, that she would love to go with him and be his love. But she understands what you're selling me is a dream, and it won't last. You can't make a world for me where I'll live forever off love and be young forever. In fact, of all the things she asked for, the only thing that he actually can give her is truth in every shepherd's tongue. He can give her honesty. And that's the only thing here that's realistic in her offer, or rather in her requirements to go with him and be his love. She apparently understands better than he does, this is the real world. You can't just live off love. You need material things, you need money. That's how this works. All right? Now there's another, again, more cynical way of looking at this. All right? She isn't just turning him down. She's stomping on him while he's down. All right? Just as soon as you can make me be young forever, just as soon as you can, make it so that we can live off love, just as soon as you can make this world where, we won't need material things, although apparently she still wants the material things, then and only then will she go with him and be his love. All right? To quote Kanye, I ain't saying she's a gold digger, but, there it is. Until he can provide her with everything he's promised her, eternal youth, a world where, decay won't happen, and, plus provide all this stuff he's promised, she ain't going with him. All right? So the two ways of looking at it. She has feelings for the guy, but she's wiser than he is and knows you can't live off love. Or she's not just, dumping him. She's kicking him while he's down and saying, just as soon as you can come through on all these impossible promises, I'll go with you and be your love. All right. The third poem on 96. The Bait by John Donne. Same rhythm, same rhyme scheme, but an entirely different subject matter this time. Donne was another poet, playwright. He was a wealthy young man. He basically lived very frivolously, burned through a lot of his money, so that by the time he had to support a wife and child or children, he was working as a poet playwright, right? And he pretty much picks up on this same melody and does his own thing with it, a remix, so to speak. Come live with me and be my love, and we will some new pleasures prove. Of golden sands and crystal brooks, with silken lines and silver hooks. All right? Just from this first stanza, we're doing something different. We will some new pleasures prove. We're going to do something different. Golden sands, crystal brooks, silken lines, silver hooks. We're going fishing. All right? What Donne does in this poem is he makes an analogy between trying to find love and fishing. All right. This one's a ballad, but it's also an ode. He praises this person's beauty to the sky and back. All right. There will the river whispering run, warmed by thine eyes more than the sun. And there the enamored fish will stay, begging themselves they may betray. When thou wilt swim in that live bath, each fish which every channel hath will amorously to thee swim, gladder to catch thee than thou him. All right? This person is so beautiful, and again, I'm going to assume it's a female, that she gives off light from her eyes that can warm the river more than the sun can. And anytime she goes out to swim in the water, the fish will just flock to her, drawn by her beauty. Even though they know it means their death, they flock to her, begging to be caught. All right. The fish in these two little stanzas. This is every dude who wants to get with this chick. She is constantly swarmed by guys. Every time she goes out, everybody wants to get with her. All right. But she is, gladder to catch. They're gladder to catch her than thou him. She don't want to get with these guys. All right. If thou be so seen, be a sloth, by sun or moon thou darkenest both. And if myself have leave to see, I need not their light, having thee. Praising her beauty again, that she's so beautiful, she's magical. If she was to not want to be seen in such circumstances, having to deal with all these fish, all these guys, she could basically blot out the light of the sun or the moon. And he's okay with this because, again, she gives off this supernatural light that he can see by. All right? He would give up the sun and the moon to have her light. All right? The next two stanzas. Let others freeze with angling reeds and cut their legs with shells and weeds, or treacherously poor fish beset with strangling snare or windowy net. Let coarse bold hands from slimy nests the bedded fish in banks out rest, or curious traders sleeve silk flies bewitch poor fish's wandering eyes. He's talking about various ways of catching fish, all right? You can wade out in the water, risk getting your legs cut up on shells and weeds, and, try to get that fish. Basically saying, if you're going to get out there, there's a chance you're going to get hurt, all right? And we talk about the different ways of catching fish with strangling snare or windowy net. A fish snare basically is kind of like a fish trap, all right? It basically, the fish can get into it but can't get back out because it gets hung in his gills. A net, of course, a windowy net, all right? Let coarse bold hands from slimy nests the bedded fish in banks out rest. Basically saying, talking about wading in there and just grabbing the fish with both hands, all right? Or curious traders sleeve silk flies bewitch poor fish's wandering eyes. Fly fishing, if you've ever done any fishing, you have a bright object on the end of your line that draws the fish's attention, makes them want to bite the bait, all right? All different ways of catching fish. And he acknowledges there's a possibility of getting hurt when you get out there in that water. There's dangerous stuff out there. All right. Now again, he's making a metaphor. All right. This is symbolic. If the fish are, people trying to find love, and the whole poem's about trying to find love, then these fishing analogies are about basically having to go out there and find somebody to love. Different ways of doing it, different baits that you use to do it. Whatever your bait might be. Maybe it's your looks, maybe it's your personality, whatever it is. And he acknowledges the fact you're possibly going to get hurt. There's stuff out there that can cut you. You may get out there and get rejected. You may run into somebody that you don't need to be with. Things like that. All right. For thee thou needest no such deceit, for thou thyself art thine own bait. That fish that is not catched thereby, alas, is wiser far than I. She doesn't have to use the same sort of tricks and traps and deceits that other people have to use when they go fishing. All right. For she is her own bait. It's that supernatural beauty. All right, is the best bait in the world. And he says there might be some fish smart enough to get away from her, but she's already caught him. Ain't gonna lie to you. Compared to the other two, I find this one a little cheesy, but it's still an entertaining little poem. And there's again with all three of them, there's some deeper hitting meanings going on here. And just like the last two, hits on all the same beats, same rhythm and rhyme scheme. The primary difference between this one and the first two is that the first is subject matter. The first two poems are a conversation between two characters, the nymph and the shepherd. And this one is its own different thing altogether. Right? We got a little bio of Raleigh on page 97. We think he was born in 1592. We know he was killed in 1618. Legend has it that Sir Walter Raleigh gained the favor of the Queen of England, Elizabeth I, by chivalrously spreading his cape over a muddy spot on the road, so that she would not get wet. In return, the Queen granted him large parcels of land in both England and Ireland and knighted him in 1584. Whatever the reason for her favor, Raleigh fell out of favor in 1592 when he married one of her maids of honor. For several years, he was forbidden at court. That's the big legendary moment when Elizabeth meets Raleigh. She gets out of her carriage. There's a muddy spot on the ground, and rather than get her feet muddy, Raleigh takes off his cape, and he's dressed to the nines. He's just as fancy as he knows how to be. And he takes off his cape, probably the best piece of clothing that he's got. He throws it on the ground so that she can walk across and not get her feet wet. All right? This is his foot in the door. All right? Now, beyond that, the guy was, like I said, he's Captain Britain. He's Indiana Jones crossed with Captain America. He'd been everywhere, done everything, seen everything. He'd been to the New World. He'd been off the map. All right? He was a privateer. This is a pirate with a permission slip from a particular government saying that we will offer you protection. We'll outfit your ships and give you a place of safe harbor. In exchange, you give us 30% of everything you take off of a ship, all right, off of an enemy ship. Now, this still means everybody else, all these other countries can still consider him a pirate, but the country he's working for, nah, he's a privateer. He's legal, all right? He helped fight off the Spanish Armada, all right, things like that. Liz was just kind of bowled over by the guy. He was impressive, all right, and he wasn't a bad-looking dude. He was a handsome man. Some people believe that there was an affair going on. But this is probably unlikely because she was significantly older than he was by this point. Like dating grandma, significantly older, that kind of a thing. In any event, for about a 8-year period there, he was, her favorite. He eventually messed up. The Queen has a group of servants called Maids of Honor. And these are girls from the finest families of England. And it was their job to, it was an honor to basically wait on the Queen. You waited on her like a maid. And in exchange, your family got hooked up, and eventually the girl gets, the Queen gets the girl the right connection. She makes an excellent marriage, stuff like that. Raleigh was carrying on with one of these maids. You didn't do that, all right? You didn't mess around behind Queen Elizabeth, Gloriana Regina, God's holy vessel, behind her back, all right? And She apparently nearly had him executed, but decided not to because she liked him too much. Instead, she just banished him. All right. Then, when all hell broke loose with the Spanish Armada invasion, she called him back. All right. Besides being a writer and a poet, he was also a mariner and a colonizer. He traveled extensively to South Carolina and set up 3 colonies on the islands off North Carolina. These are the original quote-unquote lost colonies, the original English settlements in North America on Manteo Island. No, excuse me, not Manteo, on Roanoke Island. Is it Manteo? I think it's Manteo. He basically helped set up the colonies. They were started by his brother, but he finished them. He was supposed to drop off the colonies, which were originally set up as pirate bases, to attack Spanish treasure ships leaving South America. He was delayed by this war that we mentioned earlier with the Netherlands for 3 years. When he gets back, the colony is just plain gone, and to this day, we don't know what happened to it. A lot of this exploration was motivated in part by his trying to stop the Spanish rule in the New World. Toward that end, he participated in 2 attacks against the Spanish in 1596 at Cadiz and 1597 on the Azores. Pirate raids. Him and Francis Drake went in, shot everything to pieces, lit everything on fire that would burn, stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and got the heck out. All right. Unfortunately, when James I succeeded Elizabeth, Raleigh was accused of trying to overthrow the king and was convicted of treason. There's some debate whether this was actually true or not. There's some evidence to suggest that, Raleigh wasn't James's biggest fan. A lot of English people were not crazy about the idea of a Scottish king sitting on the throne of England. And when you're king, you don't need a whole lot of evidence to do stuff. All right, so he has Raleigh arrested on charges of treason and throws him into the Tower of London. He stayed in the Tower for 13 years, where he spent a great deal of time writing. He wrote about many subjects, but perhaps his most impressive writing was the history of the world, which he wrote while he was there. So this guy's, again, kind of like Thomas Mallory. He wrote while he was in prison. It was never finished. However, it was such a fascinating book that 11 editions were printed. Finally, Raleigh persuaded James I to release him by telling him that he knew the location of valuable gold mines in South America. When Raleigh arrived in Guyana, he was sick, so he sent his crew ahead to search for the mines. His crew fought against the Spanish, which James I had ordered Raleigh not to do. The Spanish and the English have been going at it at this point for, 100 years or more, a lot more maybe, on and off. And James has finally made nice with them. There's peace between the Spanish and the English. So he specifically tells Raleigh, do not screw up my peace treaty. Well, he gets screwed up. All right. Upon hearing this, James I arrested Raleigh upon his return and had him beheaded on October 29, 1618. All right. Let me tell you a story that was told to me by my professor about the death of Walter Raleigh. All right. I don't know if this is true or not, but it's a cool story. All right. Raleigh knew he was going to be beheaded. Nothing was going to stop that. He was going to die. So the first person he calls the executioner. All right. And he pays the guy a good sum of money to do a good job the next day. All right. Don't be drunk. Don't be hungover. Make sure the axe is nice and sharp. Don't miss. All right. He knew he was going up on he knew his head was going up on a spike. All right. And he wanted to look good from the neck up. So he didn't want the guy to screw up and mess him up. All right. Beyond that, there were some such things as botched executions. There's a story about a man who had been one of King Henry VIII's favorites, but fell out of favor. A man who had made a lot of enemies. And eventually it came to pass that the guy was going to be executed. They were going to take his head off. Some of these enemies got together and got the Axeman sopping drunk the night before he's supposed to execute this guy. And when he comes out to do his job, he's still drunk. And it takes him several attempts to kill this guy. misses a couple of times, hits him in the wrong places a couple of times. So the guy's sitting here screaming bloody murder until finally somebody takes the axe away from the executioner and puts the poor guy out of his misery. Raleigh did not want to go out like that. He wanted to make sure if anybody is going to here, I'm offering you more money than anybody else might do. All right? Do a good job. Second person he called second people he called were his barber and his tailor. All right? He was going to go up on the place of execution. There's going to be people all around looking. He wanted to look good. All right? So he was dressed to the nines again. All right? And got a good shave, got his hair cut. He knew he was going to go up on that pike, and he wanted to look good from the neck up. I don't know if this story is true or not, but I can see it being true. I can see Raleigh going out this way. All right. Do your questions as normal. Remember that you have your extra credits still available, your original poem submission, and your poetry recitation. If you have any questions or need help with anything, please contact me. Text, call, or email. Thanks. Hope you have a good night.